I woke up to find my Filipina girlfriend holding well, let's just say she had a firm grip on a very private part of me. It wasn't the first time. If you're dating a Filipino or thinking about it, there are some bedroom behaviors that might surprise you. This unusual habit is actually more common than you think, and today I'm going to explain what it means and why some Filipinos do it. This intimate gesture has deep cultural roots that many foreigners misunderstand at first. What seems unusual to Westerners often carries significant meaning in Filipino culture. I wondered, was this about intimacy, comfort, or something else entirely? This scenario represents a surprisingly common experience reported by Western men in relationships with Filipinos. The phenomenon often leaves men puzzled, especially when they discover through conversations with friends that they're experiencing a shared pattern rather than an isolated incident. The mysterious nighttime habit. Imagine this. You're sleeping peacefully beside your Filipina girlfriend when something wakes you in the middle of the night. As you become aware of your surroundings, you realize her hand is gently resting on your most private area. She's fast asleep, completely unaware, yet maintaining this intimate contact throughout the night. For Western men raised with clear notions of personal space, this behavior creates genuine confusion. The cultural dissonance raises questions. Is this a sexual advance, an unconscious habit, or something deeply rooted in Filipino culture? During a casual evening of drinks in Manila, Robert from Australia discovered the widespread nature of this behavior. I honestly thought it was my girlfriend's quirk. Then, somehow the topic came up with other expats. Nearly everyone in a relationship with a Filipina had experienced the same thing. We were all equally baffled. John, an American expat living in Cebu with his girlfriend for 2 years, shared, "The first time it happened, I thought it was just a random thing. But then it kept happening night after night. She'd be sound asleep, but somehow always find her way there. I was confused because it didn't seem sexual. She was literally sleeping." David, married to his Filipino wife for over 5 years, offers insight after finally addressing the behavior directly. "When I asked my wife about it, she was embarrassed at first. Then she explained that it makes her feel safe and connected. It's like physical reassurance that I'm there with her, even when she's unconscious." The mystery deepens considering this behavior isn't typically discussed openly. It rarely appears in dating guides about Filipino culture or in discussions about cultural differences. Instead, it emerges primarily in private conversations between Western men comparing relationship experiences. What motivates this behavior remains intriguing. The fact that it occurs during sleep complicates simple interpretations. Some men wonder if it's a form of possession, a way of claiming territory. Others question if it's related to relationship insecurity, a physical way of ensuring their partner remains close throughout the night. This revelation points towards security and connection rather than desire. The nighttime habit serves as a physical anchor, creating a continuous bond during vulnerable sleeping hours. The weight of a hand, the warmth of contact, these sensations provide subconscious comfort throughout the night. This cultural difference naturally extends to adult relationships, where physical closeness symbolizes security and commitment. The specific nature of the contact holding a particularly vulnerable body part represents an expression of trust and security. It communicates, "I'm entrusting you with my most vulnerable self." Filipino society values closeness and physical proximity extensively. Many Filipinos grow up sleeping in close quarters with family members, often sharing beds well into adolescence. Personal space exists differently than in Western households, where children typically have their own rooms and privacy is emphasized early. The phenomenon crosses regional and socioeconomic lines within the Philippines. Michael from Canada notes, "My girlfriend is a professional with a master's degree. When I mentioned this habit, she had no idea she was doing it. She laughed and said her mother once told her she did the same thing with her father. It seems to be passed down generationally. Particularly fascinating is how many Filipinos engage in this behavior unconsciously. The automatic nature suggests deeply ingrained patterns rather than calculated actions. During the deepest phases of sleep, their bodies instinctively seek this specific form of contact for comfort. This generational aspect points to cultural transmission rather than individual quirks. While not universal among all Filipinos, the behavior appears common enough to represent a cultural pattern. For Western men experiencing this for the first time, understanding the security-seeking motivation transforms perception. What initially seems invasive often reveals itself as a profound expression of trust and desire for constant connection. This nighttime habit illustrates how differently intimacy can be expressed across cultures. What appears strange through a Western lens makes sense within Filipino values around closeness. Not every Filipina exhibits this behavior, but its frequency suggests cultural significance that goes as casual habit, reflecting deeply held beliefs about how security in relationships should feel, even in the vulnerability of sleep. To understand this behavior fully, we need to examine it through attachment theory, a framework that explains how humans form emotional bonds from infancy through adulthood. This intimate gesture, while seemingly sexual to Western observers, represents something more primal, the need for security and connection during our most vulnerable state. While Western partners might initially misinterpret this behavior, research by Filipino sex therapist Rica Cruz reveals something surprising. The same women who seek this innocent form of security during sleep often fantasize about relinquishing control in their conscious, intimate life. Compelling contradiction that speaks volumes about cultural pressures and personal desires. Security and intimacy, understanding the psychology. The behavior represents a fascinating intersection of vulnerability and protection. Sleep is when we are at our most defenseless, and this unconscious gesture creates a tangible connection that persists even when consciousness fades. This isn't about possession or control, but rather about maintaining security through physical connection. Cultural differences in physical boundaries often create misunderstandings in cross-cultural relationships. Western societies typically emphasize individuality and personal space, with clear demarcations between your space and my space, even in intimate relationships. In contrast, Filipino culture places greater emphasis on collectivism and physical proximity as expressions of care and connection. Physical touch serves as a powerful anchor in relationships across cultures. Research shows that skin-to-skin contact releases oxytocin, the bonding hormone, which reduces stress and creates feelings of trust and security. This contact functions like an emotional safety blanket, providing reassurance even when words cannot. For many Filipinos, this specific form of touch during sleep addresses fundamental psychological needs that may not be fully met during waking hours. Rica Cruz, a prominent Filipino sex and relationships therapist with extensive clinical experience studying intimacy patterns, offers valuable insights into this phenomena. Her research highlights an intriguing paradox. Many Filipino women who exhibit security-seeking behaviors during sleep often fantasize about rougher, more adventurous sexual experiences while awake. This seeming contradiction makes perfect sense when viewed through a cultural lens. The security-seeking behavior during sleep represents an authentic need for connection, while fantasies about relinquishing control can be understood as a response to societal expectations that Filipino women should be gentle and reserved. The behavior also connects to broader patterns of attachment in Filipino relationships. Filipino culture emphasizes strong family bonds from birth, with multiple caregivers and extended family members playing significant roles in child rearing. This creates attachment patterns where physical proximity and constant reassurance are normalized early in life. This dual nature, seeking security while desiring freedom from constraints, reflects how many Filipino women navigate between cultural expectations and personal desires. The nighttime habit becomes a way of expressing needs that might otherwise go unacknowledged, while fantasies offer a psychological escape from limiting cultural narratives. Western concepts of personal space differ dramatically from Filipino norms. The American Psychological Association recognizes that personal space expectations vary significantly across cultures, with Western cultures typically requiring more physical distance than Eastern or Filipino cultures. Economic factors in the Philippines also influence this security-seeking behavior. The country faces significant income inequality, with many families experiencing financial instability. Physical security becomes a proxy for broader security needs: emotional, financial, and social. The prevalence of overseas work creates another dimension to this security-seeking behavior. With millions of Filipinos working abroad, separation anxiety becomes a common psychological experience. Physical touch during vulnerable moments like sleep can help alleviate the fear of abandonment that underlies many relationship dynamics in Filipino culture. This intimate gesture represents trust and security rather than possession. When a Filipina unconsciously maintains this contact during sleep, she's demonstrating a profound level of trust, feeling safe enough to be completely vulnerable while seeking reassurance that this safety will remain throughout the night. The Filipino concept of pakikisama, getting along with others, influences physical boundaries as well. This cultural value emphasizes harmony and connection over individual comfort, making close physical proximity a normal aspect of relationships. For many Filipinos, maintaining physical contact during sleep is a natural expression of closeness. So how should Western men respond when they find themselves experiencing this unique expression of intimacy? The answer begins with understanding rather than judgment. Recognizing that this behavior stems from cultural differences in attachment and security needs changes how it is perceived. What might initially seem strange can be recognized as a deeply trusting gesture when understood in its cultural context. How to respond: setting boundaries without causing offense. When cultural intimacy meets personal discomfort, a single conversation can either strengthen your relationship or damage it beyond repair. Imagine finding yourself caught between respecting her cultural expression and honoring your own comfort levels. This delicate balance requires skills most Western men were never taught. Consider Thomas, a 35-year-old American who recently moved to Manila with his Filipina girlfriend, Elena. After experiencing this intimate nighttime gesture for several weeks, he found himself increasingly restless and unable to sleep well. Though he understood the behavior wasn't sexual in nature, he felt uncomfortable but worried about hurting Elena's feelings. "I didn't want her to think I was rejecting her," Thomas explained. "But I also couldn't continue pretending it wasn't affecting me. I just didn't know how to bring it up without making her feel embarrassed." This scenario highlights a crucial challenge in cross-cultural relationships. How do you honor your own boundaries while respecting your partner's cultural expressions of intimacy? The solution requires thoughtful communication that acknowledges both perspectives. Approaching sensitive topics requires careful consideration of timing and setting. Choose a neutral moment, not during intimacy or an argument, to create space for honest dialogue. A relaxed weekend morning or quiet evening when you're both feeling connected provides the emotional safety needed for vulnerable conversations. When initiating this discussion, framing matters tremendously. Center the conversation on your feelings rather than making her behavior the focus. You might say, "I've noticed something about our sleeping habits that I'd like to talk about. I'm not used to this type of contact while sleeping, and it makes it difficult for me to get restful sleep." This approach avoids blame while honestly expressing your experience. The way you phrase your concerns significantly impacts how they're received. Instead of saying, "Why do you always grab me there?" It's weird. Try, "I'm not used to this type of contact during sleep, and it sometimes makes me feel uncomfortable. Can we talk about it?" The first approach risks shaming, while the second opens a door for understanding. Before expressing your discomfort, understand her perspective by asking, "Can you help me understand what this means to you?" Or, "Is this something that's common in your family or culture?" These questions demonstrate genuine interest in her experience rather than dismissing the behavior. As you listen, you might discover nuances you hadn't considered. Perhaps this gesture represents deep trust or provides security stemming from cultural experiences. Understanding these motivations helps you respond with greater empathy, even if you ultimately need different boundaries. Finding alternatives that satisfy both partners' needs is essential. You might suggest other ways to maintain physical closeness, such as holding hands, intertwining legs, or cuddling in positions comfortable for both of you. This acknowledges her need for connection while respecting your boundaries. Marco, a British man married to his Filipino wife for 3 years, navigated this situation successfully. "When I mentioned feeling uncomfortable, Maria seemed hurt initially. Instead of dwelling on the discomfort, I suggested finding other ways to feel connected during sleep. We discovered that sleeping with her head on my chest gave her the same sense of security without crossing my comfort boundaries. Now we both sleep better, and neither feels rejected." Avoid negative reactions like laughing at the behavior, expressing disgust, or making her feel childish. These responses can create shame around cultural expressions and damage trust. Even if the behavior seems unusual to you, remember that from her perspective, it may be a normal expression of affection. Pay close attention to nonverbal cues during these conversations. Filipino communication often relies on indirectness and avoiding confrontation. If she becomes quiet, looks down, or physically withdraws, these might indicate she's feeling shame, even if she verbally agrees with everything you're saying. Joseph, from Canada, noticed his girlfriend Rena kept saying "it's okay," while her body language suggested otherwise. Instead of accepting her words at face value, I said, "I feel like this is bothering you more than you're saying. It's important we find a solution that feels good for both of us." That's when she opened up about feeling rejected, and we had a much more honest conversation. Successfully navigating these cultural differences builds relationships on deeper understanding and trust. By approaching differences with curiosity rather than judgment, you demonstrate respect for your partner's cultural background while honoring your own needs. The goal isn't to completely change either person, but to create a shared culture within your relationship that honors both backgrounds. The adoption phenomenon. Why Filipinas move fast. Adapting to cultural differences works both ways, but few Western men are prepared for what Filipino culture considers a normal relationship timeline. Behind what foreigners often misinterpret as moving too fast lies a complex web of family values, economic realities, and cultural expectations that shape how Filipinos approach relationships from day one. Take James, a 42-year-old engineer from Chicago who met Tina through an online dating site. After 3 months of video calls and messages, he flew to Manila to meet her. "Everything was going great," James recalls. "But by day 5 of my 2-week trip, she was asking when I'd meet her parents. By day 10, she was discussing which of my spare bedrooms her younger sister could use when visiting us in America. I felt like I'd missed some major relationship milestone without realizing it." This experience reflects what many expatriates and foreign partners encounter when dating Filipinas, a relationship acceleration that can feel disorienting. What James experienced wasn't unusual or manipulative. It was a natural expression of relationship development from a Filipino cultural perspective. The difference lies in how collectivist versus individualistic societies structure their social expectations. While Western dating often follows a linear progression, dating, exclusivity, meeting friends, meeting family, moving in together, engagement, Marriage. Filipino relationship timelines often compress these stages or rearrange them entirely. Family integration happens remarkably early in Filipino relationships. While Western partners might wait months before introducing a significant other to parents, in Filipino culture, family approval is sought almost immediately. This cultural imperative reflects the deeply collectivist nature of Filipino society, where family units, not individuals, are considered the basic social building block. When a Filipina brings you home to meet her family early in the relationship, she's following cultural protocols that signal respect for her family's role in her life decisions. This early integration creates expectations of commitment that Western partners may not realize they're signaling by participating. This rapid adoption phenomenon resembles being unexpectedly invited to a family reunion where you're suddenly introduced as a new member rather than a guest. You're given family recipes, included in photos, and assigned responsibilities before you've fully understood your place in the gathering. Ryan, a 38-year-old Australian living in Davao, experienced this firsthand. After dating Maricel for just 6 weeks, her mother called me a knack child and started sending me home with prepared meals. Before I knew it, I was expected at family gatherings and being consulted on family decisions. It felt like I'd been fully incorporated into their family unit before I'd even decided if our relationship was long-term. This integration happens because Filipino relationships involve family networks, not just individuals. When you date a Filipina, you're often dating her entire family. By extension, family members actively participate in relationship development, providing opinions, support, and even intervention when they feel it's needed. The speed difference becomes pronounced when discussing living arrangement. Filipino culture doesn't place the same premium on independent living that Western societies do. Due to both economic necessity and cultural preference, many adult Filipinos live with their families until marriage. When a relationship becomes serious, there's often an immediate consideration of shared living arrangements, not because of impulsiveness, but because independent living isn't the established norm. Another factor accelerating relationship timelines is the cultural value placed on companionship over independence. While Western culture often celebrates the finding yourself phase of early adulthood, Filipino culture places higher value on the security and fulfillment found in partnership. Dr. Elena Santos, a cultural psychologist from the University of the Philippines, explains, in Filipino psychology, the concept of kapwa, or shared identity, is fundamental. The self isn't defined in isolation, but in relation to others. This creates relationship patterns where quick integration isn't seen as losing independence, but as gaining connection, something highly valued in our culture. Before judging these differences, it's essential to recognize they reflect equally valid but different cultural frameworks for building relationships. Neither approach is inherently superior. For Western men building relationships with Filipinos, recognizing these differences is about adaptation, not judgment. Setting clear boundaries early in the relationship can prevent misunderstandings. If you're uncomfortable with the pace, express this respectfully while acknowledging the cultural differences at play. Most Filipinos will appreciate honesty over reluctant participation in accelerated timelines that lead to resentment. Finding middle ground often means compromising on timeline expectations. Perhaps you're not ready for her to move in after 3 months, but you can include her in family video calls to acknowledge the importance of family integration. Small steps that respect both cultures create stronger foundations than rigid adherence to either extreme. Shy yet passionate. The paradox of Filipino sexuality. Cultural adaptation continues in the most private aspects of relationships. Beneath the shy exterior, many Filipinos present to the world lies an unexpected truth. Research shows Filipino women often desire experiences that completely contradict their Maria Clara image. This disconnect between public perception and private desire creates one of the most Misunderstood aspects of dating Filipino women. Like a quiet pond whose still surface belies the vibrant life beneath. Filipino women often maintain a modest public appearance while harboring passionate desires within. The Maria Clara ideal represents the pinnacle of Filipino feminine virtue, modest, demure, and pure. This cultural archetype traces back to Spanish colonial influence and continues to shape expectations of how Filipino women should behave, especially regarding their sexuality. This cultural ideal remains deeply embedded in contemporary Filipino society, creating complex challenges for women navigating their own desires. Rica Cruz, a prominent Filipino sex and relationships therapist, has uncovered a fascinating paradox in her research. Behind closed doors, many Filipino women express desires for experiences that directly contradict their public personas, including fantasies about rough sex and even public sexual encounters. Cruz suggests these desires might actually be a response to long-held societal expectations that women should be gentle and reserved. The Catholic Church's profound influence in the Philippines provides essential context for understanding this dichotomy. With over 80% of the population identifying as Catholic, religious teachings on chastity, modesty, and sexual expression within marriage have significantly shaped cultural attitudes. This religious framework helps explain why many Filipinas might initially appear reserved in intimate settings. This contrast between public modesty and private passion represents a complex psychological response to restrictive cultural norms. For many Filipinas, these desires serve as a way to reclaim their sexuality and explore what truly excites them, challenging traditional narratives that have historically limited their sexual expression. A revealing study by Margarita Lea Delgado Infante and Mira Alexis Pineda Ranea explored how young Filipino women construct sexual agency within the context of Catholicism. Their research found that women's experiences of first sexual encounters were often linked to preserving their social status and maintaining a good girl position. The researchers identified several themes in how women describe these experiences, including giving in, nadala, being carried away, love, self-expression, and coercion. Despite the conservative environment, evidence shows evolving sexual attitudes among Filipino youth. The 1994 survey by Dr. Zacy Zablon revealed that while 80% of Filipino youth disapproved of premarital sex, 18% accepted it. This indicates a growing openness, particularly among female college graduates in urban areas who demonstrate more liberal attitudes and higher rates of contraception use. This shift reflects the influence of global media and increased international communication. The Madonna-whore dichotomy significantly impacts how Filipino sexuality is perceived and expressed. This psychological framework creates a profound conflict. Women are expected to be modest, but may also desire sexual fulfillment. Research shows men who endorse this dichotomy tend to report lower relationship satisfaction, while some studies suggest men raised with these rigid categories might develop exhibitionist fantasies stemming from cultural expectations that men should always be sexually eager. Filipino women's sexual satisfaction is heavily influenced by these cultural and religious expectations. Traditional values often prioritize the husband's satisfaction over the wife's. However, research indicates that younger, more educated, and less religious women tend to report higher rates of sexual satisfaction and orgasm. Western media has increased the proportion of Filipinas who prefer both emotional and physical stimulation during intimate encounters. The Western men in relationships with Filipinas understanding this complex sexual landscape is crucial. Creating a safe space for authentic expression requires patience and cultural sensitivity. Building trust is essential before expecting sexual openness. This means demonstrating consistent respect, avoiding judgment, and showing genuine interest in your partner's comfort and pleasure. Communication about sex benefits from a gradual approach. Direct questions about desires might initially be met with embarrassment. Instead, create opportunities for comfortable conversations about preferences, perhaps starting with non-sexual topics and gradually moving toward more intimate discussions as trust builds. Privacy is paramount. The fear of judgment from family or community can significantly inhibit sexual expression. Ensuring absolute discretion respects cultural sensitivities and builds confidence for vulnerability. Understanding the interplay between modesty and desire doesn't mean stereotyping all Filipinas. Individual preferences vary widely. The key insight is recognizing that cultural conditioning creates tension between external expectations and internal desires, making communication and patience essential elements in nurturing intimate relationships with Filipino women. Beyond the bedroom, food preferences and cultural comfort. This cultural complexity extends far beyond intimate moments. Picture this. You've made reservations at an upscale restaurant, eager to treat your Filipino partner to an evening of culinary delights. The menu features exquisite international cuisine, delicate French preparations, innovative Evasan dishes, and exotic ingredients from around the world. Yet when the waiter arrives, she orders the simplest item available, plain steamed rice. The fragrant aromas of saffron and truffle oil waft through the air as crystal glasses clink and fine china gleams under soft lighting. In this symphony of culinary sophistication, her choice stands out, a humble bowl of white rice amid the artistic plating surrounding you. At first glance, this choice might seem puzzling or even disappointing. You might wonder if she's being overly frugal, unappreciative of your gesture, or simply disinterested in culinary exploration. But her preference for familiar foods reveals something profound about Filipino cultural values, economic realities, and deeply ingrained survival instincts. Rice stands as a beacon of tradition in Filipino culture, representing security, tradition, and identity. For many Filipinas, especially those raised in economically challenging circumstances, rice forms the foundation of every satisfying meal. Its presence on the plate provides a sense of completeness and comfort that transcends the actual flavor or nutritional value. When faced with unfamiliar culinary territory, ordering rice creates an anchor of familiarity in an otherwise uncertain dining experience. In households with limited financial resources, meals often consist primarily of rice, accompanied by small portions of fish or other accessible proteins. This practical approach to food consumption prioritizes affordability and minimizes potential waste, when eating becomes a matter of sustenance rather than recreation. Experimenting with unfamiliar dishes represents an unnecessary risk, both financially and emotionally. The decision to stick with familiar foods in new environments demonstrates the powerful influence of early food experiences and economic conditioning. Just as many Westerners might gravitate toward comfort foods during stressful times, Filipinos often seek the reassurance of familiar flavors when navigating culturally unfamiliar settings. Food neophobia. The reluctance to try new foods exists across cultures, but its expression varies significantly. In Filipino contexts, this hesitation often manifests as a preference for traditional dishes or simple preparations. This practical approach to consumption has been shaped by generations of economic reality, where wasting food was considered a serious transgression. The hesitation to try unfamiliar dishes parallels the same security-seeking behaviors we've discussed in other contexts. Just as physical closeness during sleep provides comfort and reassurance, familiar foods offer a sense of stability and control in potentially overwhelming situations. Both behaviors stem from the fundamental desire for security in an unpredictable world. When your Filipino partner orders plain rice at an upscale restaurant, she's navigating the experience according to principles that have ensured survival and harmony throughout her life. As one Filipino proverb states, "Pag may sinapan, may tutay non." If you save something, you'll have something to turn to later. A philosophy that extends from financial resources to culinary choices. This is why pressure and criticism rarely succeed in changing these behaviors. Comments like, "You should try this," or "Don't be so boring," fail to acknowledge the legitimate cultural and economic factors shaping food preferences. Such remarks may even reinforce the anxiety around unfamiliar foods, making experimentation even less likely. A more effective approach involves patience and gradual introduction, creating a safe environment for culinary exploration, perhaps by ordering several dishes to share family style rather than individual entree, allows for low-risk sampling without the pressure of commitment to an entire unfamiliar meal. Celebrating small steps toward culinary adventure rather than expecting immediate enthusiasm builds confidence and trust. Many Western partners find that, over time, with support and encouragement rather than criticism, their Filipino partners gradually expand their culinary horizons. The key lies in respecting the cultural forces at work rather than dismissing them as stubbornness or lack of sophistication. For many Filipinas, food embodies identity, tradition, and community. Maintaining connections to familiar foods provides a sense of continuity and belonging, especially when living in unfamiliar cultural contexts. This approach to food mirrors the same values we've seen in other relationship behaviors, prioritizing security, maintaining connections to tradition, and making practical choices that reflect deep cultural wisdom. Understanding these patterns transforms potentially frustrating moments into opportunities for deeper cultural understanding, allowing you to support your partner's need for comfort while gently expanding shared experiences together. So what's the main takeaway from everything we've explored? Simply that successful cross-cultural relationships, especially with Filipinos, flourish through open communication, mutual respect, genuine cultural appreciation. These essential tools help navigate potential misunderstandings. Approaching unfamiliar behavior with curiosity transforms seemingly strange actions into meaningful expressions of values. Interpreting actions within their cultural context prevents misinterpretations and builds deeper connections. The beauty of cross-cultural relationships lies in how our differences reveal meaningful insights about ourselves, creating bonds that are both challenging and rewarding. Wondering how to start your own cross-cultural journey? Stay tuned.